This is the next instructional video of this racing lawnmower quick start guide. This is the last one. What we're going to talk about here is the transaxle, welding up the transaxle to make it a solid axle. So, and this is something you do want to do. You lose a bit of the cornering, of course, but you end up making it so that it'll drift, and it makes it so that it's not just one wheel driving it. So there are two different trains of thought I'll show you. The first is this. This is a gear that has been welded up. Now, I've never done it this way. What you do is you weld up half of the gears, and the theory is that it can only roll so far and then it locks up. I've not tried that mechanism. Some of our racers have done it. I picked one of these up, this one here, up from one of the other racers, and I don't know how well it works. There's a little bit of slop in it, so before it locks up, I can't give you an opinion on it. What I have done, though, is I've welded up several of these, and what I'll do, let me get over here, is I will reach right down inside, down in here, and I will weld this spider gear to the shaft. And I'll do that on both sides. Now, I've done this. I have a MIG welder and an arc welder. And my first attempts, I did two of them, and I couldn't get my nozzle down in there to get enough heat and enough penetration to burn through the hard facing to where the weld would stick. So my solution was actually to move to an arc welder, because I can reach an arc rod right down into the bottom of it and tack it in the place that it needs to be. And I'll do the same on both sides. And then once I've tacked it in place, then I'll bring it out and I'll put a pretty good bead on it. Now, the thing about that is you want to get it cleaned up. And we have had our race director try this. The first one he tried, and what he did was he clamped it so that it wouldn't move. Now, when he did that, the clamping actually tweaked it. And then once he put it back together, it made it spin untrue. So every one that I've done 4 of them, this will be number 5, is I've just left them in there floating, just like that. So what I'll do is I'll pull this back gear set apart, the axle and the gear, and then I'll clean all the grease off of it. Then I will put it back in, and then I'll weld it up, and then clean up the spatter and the mess that comes with the weld, and then I'll turn around and I'll put the top on it and make sure it spins. Now, when you pull the top off, you don't need to pull that drive gear out of it. All I do is pop it off. Now, the one thing that I would tell you is I use this little T-handle to work with the, where is it? Right down, let's just find it there. There it is. I use this little T-handle, and it's small, it's 1/4 inch drive. I use that to do all the tightening and loosening, and the reason being is, you know, this is cast aluminum. If you get too much pressure on them, too much leverage with a big socket or big ratchet or whatever, and you'll strip out. I've stripped a couple of them out and had to thread up to a bigger size. So just get a smaller tool that you can't over torque it and strip the threads. So you pop all the bolts out. There's a bunch of them right down here. And this is what you've got. Pop the top off. Now, the other thing that I want to show you as well that we do is this reverse chain right here. I'll pull this gear set out, and I'm going to take this chain off. It's easy to do once you get the gears out. It just slips off. We take the reverse out of them. The logic is you're spinning these things much faster than they were engineered to do. They'll handle it. Surprisingly, they handle it quite well. But this chain just sits in there and flaps around, and it's just going crazy. And usually that's what breaks. You'll break the chain, and then it starts flying around there in a million different pieces, and it will just trash the inside of your transaxle. So all of our machines, when we open them up to do this, we take that chain off. We don't do anything with the gears. You leave the gears that drive the reverse, that reverse chain, because it's spacing. But we'll remove it. and it also makes it so you have a bigger shifting range on your lever for reverse. So anyway, I think that's about all I've got. So I'll clean this up, and what I will do is I won't tear all the grease out of it. There's no need. I will take some rags and cover all of this here, and I'll tuck it down in, and then what I'll do is probably put some cardboard over the top of that, and then once I get this set up, then I'll just reach in with my arc rod and put a tack there, and then I'll put a tack on the other side. That way it can stay. Now the other thing you want to do as well is mark these. So mark the gears where they sit, as they sit. Either a punch or a cold chisel, make a little mark so that you can put them back in exactly how you welded them. Because they will tweak a little bit with the weld creep, but if you mark them and put them back in, they'll spin fine. So you don't want to get these out of balance in any way, shape, or form. And then they start wearing out here. It spins untrue. The wheel goes crooked. So that's about all I've got for this. So I'll tear this apart, and then once I get it welded up, I'll show you what I've done. Alright, now I've got the weld surface cleaned up. And like I say, my first couple, I scooped all the grease out, and you can do that. You really can. For the sake of time and whatnot, I'm just going to spend a little more time covering it, sealing it up, and I'll only have this area right here exposed. So, but what I do want to show is this is the way they're going to lay out. I've got my marks. I don't know if you see those two dimples right up there. Right about there. So I've got those marked, got my gears marked. So now I just want to show you what the weld surfaces are. What I will do is I'll put this back in where it sits, inside the ring gear, and once I get it all set up, I will put the seals back in where they go. These rubber seals right out here. That's what they look like. So once I get that put back in, I'll probably scoop this grease out as well so I don't have to fight it. But what I'll do is I'm going to put a weld right down here. I'm going to put a weld right down there, and a weld right there, and then a weld on the top side. So that's what I'm going to do. What that does is that ties it all together, makes it so these gears can't spin, and this all becomes one piece. So, and then what I will do is I'll roll it over. That's why I'll scoop the grease out of the bottom here. And I'll put a tack on the bottom side, a weld. Won't be a big long weld, it'll just be a good solid tack. And then I'll flip it over and do the same on the other side as much as I can. So I don't want to weld these axles to this at all. I'll just focus my weld. Let me get here so you can see. I'll just focus my weld right along here. And I'm not going to pop those snap rings off either. I never have. I've just used them there and burned through it. So, and then like I say, you know, with it in the housing, I couldn't get my MIG gun down there to get enough heat. Now, I have seen where people have taken this all apart. They've ground off the hard facing so they could get a good weld. I found that, you know what, I'll just hit it with some 6011. It's a good penetrating rod, and if I put a good solid tack, little bead across there and across the tops, and then roll it over and do the same with it in the chassis, that seemed to work for me. So that's what I wanted to show you. Cleaned up most of the grease so I don't have to smell it, breathe it, and all that. And that's all I'm doing. You're really looking at 4 welds per side, so 8 little tacks, and then it should be done. But I have to emphasize again, in the housing, don't clamp it, just let it float where it's going to lay, and that's going to work the best for you. So alright, so I'll do that, and then I'll show you what it looks like when we're done. Okay, so I've got this almost ready to go. I've got rags covering everything up, so that'll help keep the welding splatter from getting everywhere. You know, you get a little bit of weld splatter in a gear box, and the way the gear teeth mesh, it can cause havoc. So anyway, that's going to minimize as much of it as I can, and then that way I'll only have to really worry about cleaning up down underneath, right down through here. So then once again, I don't know how well you, there we go, now you can see it. Okay, that's where I'm going to be welding. So the gears are in there, they spin freely, I've tested them, and then I'm going to turn around and put a weld there, and a weld on that one, and then I'm going to come around on this side. I'm actually going to put a little tack far down in there, and then I will come around and I'll put a weld right down there. So, and then what I'll do is I'll spin the whole thing over and do the same on the other side, and it'll be about a 1/2 inch weld. That's all it'll be. So alright, so I'll do that, and we'll show you the end result. Alright, this is it done. So I haven't put it back together yet. Somebody else has already been into this one because there's silicone all over it, and they don't come that way from the factory. So before I show you this, I just want to talk a couple things. If you've never been into these transaxles, there's a couple things that you need to know. First of all, you're not going to be able to do this, remove the reverse chain, without having to take these gear sets out. So one of the things I want to mention or show is these bushings right down here. You see that little tang? Well, that little tang, if I change the angle here, you can see how there's a little notch. There it is. Right there. So you want to be careful when you pull these out that that tang is actually rolled around. That keeps that bushing from spinning inside the chassis or sitting there spinning. So it's kind of a stop. They all have them. This one does too. So you'll want to, and you'll see that one side's got this angle. So you just want to be conscientious of that when you put it back together. Make sure that they're in good shape, because it's a stop that holds that bushing in place. This one's got one too. I actually set all these out so I could show you. So you want to make sure that those are in the right spot so that bushing doesn't sit and spin. Otherwise it'll just destroy them. So, and that's what that does, is stops that bushing from just sitting there spinning, wearing itself out. So that's one thing. The other thing that I want to mention is this one right here is your drive gear that comes in from that gear on the top. So that's what spins that. You don't need to remove that gear set out. I did on the first one, did on the second one too, and it was a nightmare. Nah, it's just more work. You can do this without having to remove that, but you want to make sure that that's got the snap rings in place so that it lines itself up and down. So that's the main drive gear. That's the one that's tied to the pulley on your jack shaft. That spins through. Now the other thing I found, and I ran into this too, is just set it in neutral, and that's where this shifter right here. So that's in neutral. I haven't messed with that since I opened it up. Same with up here. That's in neutral. So when I put this lid back on, it shifts, it's fine, it works. The other thing that I also want to mention is there's also, on some of these, not as many, there's these little tangs. It looks like a slug, or what do they call it, a plug nickel or whatever. You want to make sure that you don't lose those, because that goes down in these halves. Some of these transaxles will have 2 of them. This one happens to only have 1. But you want to make sure that that lines up there, right down in that. There's a groove for it to sit in. Keep the fluid in. And then this O-ring on this outer end. So those are things to be aware of. Make sure that you put them back where they belong, if you will. Don't lose them. Don't let them fall into the pile of grease. And I think that's about it. But now let's look at the finished product here. So I'm going to spin this a little bit. Move this. Alright, so there's my welded axle right there. So I've got a weld there on the top. I've got a weld down there you can see on the axle. And if I move around to this side, I don't know how the light's going to work. Won't. Maybe there you can see there's a weld. Now if I spin this like so by hand, just like it should, both axles are spinning, that's locked up tight, and now you can see that I've got a weld in the same place on the bottom. So there's two welds. Weld on the gear set, and there's a weld down in there. So that's it. Not big welds. I used a 3/32 6011. It's a real penetrating cleaning rod, and it works well. So anyway, this is the way I do it. I found that it works. I did try my first one with a MIG, and I just couldn't get the gun down in here to get enough penetration. So I've just moved to the arc welder, and I've had good success with it since then. So anyway, so now this is the last real video. I think I've mentioned this before, but I just want to recap that, you know, all of these are concepts on this racing lawnmower build. You just kind of want to take them as that. I mean, I don't claim to be an expert lawnmower builder, but I do know I've been doing this for about 4 years, built several of them, and with all of our racers watched what's worked and what's failed, and so I've kind of put all the ideas and concepts together and presented them to you. So take it and do what you will with it, and hopefully we'll see you on the track having a good time with the rest of us.